Night of the Living Dead. That's right, we are entering into the spookiest season of them all. And that means on Movie Tales, we're delving into some of the classics of horror. And of course, I had to start with one of the most influential horror films ever made. Like, I think you look at the modern landscape of cinema, and especially in this genre, and you gotta commend George A. Romero for just being like, yeah, I get it. Low budget, creepy, nobody comes out alive, just some weird stuff happening all about. I think that is phenomenal. And the fact that this came out in 68 makes it all the more impressive because this just is perfectly encapsulated of that time period. You know, we're on the verge of the 70s movement where we're doing, like the film student era where everyone's coming out. And then this is just like that kind of classic horror setup. We do like our big build. We start off in like the graveyard. We're seeing like this, brother and sister type, and they're just like, at the graveyard. And then suddenly the dead are here. It's simple. It's not over the top, but somehow it works all the same to make this story incredibly cool. Now, the zombie trope is something that has been around forever, and it kind of starts with this film, but I just think, like, if you look at everything in the genre, because I think zombie filmmaking and just zombie stories has kind of become, like, its own genre, you have to trace it kind of back to, like, what this story kind of pitched the idea of being, like, these slow-walking, mindless beings hunting for humans, just kind of, like, become this, like, mindless hive attacking the nearest source of subsistence. And it kind of all comes back to this. And you know what? It's very impressive that this kind of show and this kind of movie, especially in 68, holds up that well. Because horror movies, like old horror movies, can sometimes lose their flair. But this story, it feels like you could remake it today. And I know that animated movie came out recently, but like this story is just perfectly a bottle episode of watching these people struggle to survive. We're following Judith O'Dea. She's like running into this house, and we see like the occupants inside that house and the people coming in to find like who's alive and what's going on there. It is as bare bones as a story could be. We're running away from this threat. We are trying to survive in this house when everyone's kind of like on edge and they don't trust each other. It is super impressive and super scary that it actually works. I just think like this is so minimal, and it just goes to show you Romero knows what to do when you don't got money. We do it in just like this really simplistic style. We use the idea of a dead person, so you don't need that much extra makeup. You just make them look rough and rugged. You have them just walking in these slow areas. You shoot it all in one location, and you just play around with that area. So you got like the basement, the attic, the upstairs, the downstairs, the main rooms, all these other areas to explore in this one location, and you build the tension around that. It's like we have all four walls enclosed in on us in this house, and that's kind of like what adds to the tension of the situation. Can we escape it? Can we get out of here? It's really impressive to see that stuff. And I've never been the biggest fan of the zombie stuff. I'm not. I just think, the trope's been played out numerous times for my generation where it all comes back to like, this, that, and the other thing, and it's just not that interesting. But I've always have a fondness for this film, maybe because it's like the first in that genre and kind of like built this idea of what all this stuff could be. But I really like this film. I think, looking at just the actual horror elements, the camera work is fantastic. The close-up shots, the cutaways, just everything is so fast-paced and energetic. And in the slow moments, you're terrified. The tension is building up in these beautiful ways. It's an incredibly well-made film in that aspect, but it also has something to say. And I don't want to get too political or politically correct in talking about a movie about zombies, because what's the point of that? Everyone's got their own thing to say, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at the actual end of this film and like how this movie sets itself apart from the rest, it is damn well impressive. That ending, and I guess we could talk about it. Like, we end up with Dwayne Jones, our last man standing. He looks like he's going to be escaping the horde. The police have come to save him. But because of the color of his skin, as soon as he exits the building, he is shot by the police. And what a statement. You could say what you want about that time. So this is right in like the bubble of a lot of stuff going on in like, the political climate all over the world, but mainly in America. That is saying like, hey, it's good for good or bad, for better or worse. It is saying like, as that kind of a man in this country, there is going to be certain things that will happen to you. Even when it's the end of the world, you are still that. And I'm like, that is just incredibly powerful and scary. And it's one of those small things that not a lot of people are going to think about, especially of, like the mindless generation that might be watching this for fun. But if you think about it, in 68, your last man standing, it's become a trope in, movies like this where the first character dies, the African American character, but he's our last one standing, and as soon as he gets that chance of freedom, it's taken away from him. Just let that metaphor sink in for a minute. It's intense and gripping. And, let's talk about the zombies for a bit, because, like everything does their zombie thing, and there's different types of zombies. I think these ones, they're not that scary, maybe because they're just slow-walking people, but there's an enemy there. There's something you can be frightened of just by these slow-moving people. There's actually some intensity and some fear that they bring, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, it's not that intense. They're clearly just people acting, and that's kind of like the thing that zombies have to get a certain thing right, is that it shouldn't come across as people like doing a performance of like but like an actual dead thing just walking. And I think we're getting there in this, where it's just like, of course, because what do you compare it to? Of course, there's been like stories about things rising from the dead, but in this capacity where it's just like a bunch of like a horde of beings closing in on you, how do you like portray that in a good way? You haven't really seen it in this genre before, or into like the aesthetic where it works that well. So while I think the zombies are terrifying, they do like pose a threat to our team, they aren't that interesting at times. And I can buy that, just because we are slowly getting to what a zombie's going to become. Is this the first film that uses the term zombie? I can't remember if that was like the case or not. I think this is one of the earlier cases. If not, it is the earliest case. I really like it. It's a great use of the word. It's just really fun. And, there's enough people in this movie where we have our like cast of characters. We got our, like our younger kids, our parents trying to help those kids, our damsel in distress, which I get it. Like, one of my biggest criticisms of this film, and I'm going to just be like, it's the 60s, that's going to happen. But Judith O'Dea kind of like gets, a little bit of the ring around for being like the woman who's like, I just saw a lot of weird shit and I can't contain myself. This is not a normal situation going on. And all the kind of like men are yelling at her. It's like, get it together, woman. Like, fix yourself up, make yourself useful. That stuff, I'm just like, yeah, of course. It's just that era of horror, in a sense, where it's just like the woman has to be scared, but a woman is still leading a horror movie, so I don't know. It's just really interesting in that way, and I wish it just worked better for me, where I just bought it and I cared about that story a little bit more. That being said, you can't talk about this film without talking about like the impact it had on cinema and horror films, because everything comes back to this, the term of zombies, like the closed off tension building. You can tell this inspired a lot of filmmakers going forward. In particular, I would say Sam Raimi was probably inspired a lot by this film, because you got a lot of those certainly camera movements that Raimi became known for happening in here. I think it's great. Like, for a film set in 1968, and like that being when it's filmed, it looks insanely modern. Like, the camera movements are beautiful. The characterizations are very classical and just perfect for any generation. Like, this film works really well. Whether you set it today, yesterday, or tomorrow, it's really impressive. And that's George A. Romero. Like, the guy, love him or hate him, but if you hate him, I don't understand why. He is just brilliant. He knows what he's doing. He can make a compelling story with just a small cast, a small budget, and make you scared, and just be like the grandfather to what horror would become. Just like this intensity, fear-gripping thing. This is a slow build to get to this one situation that just attacks you from all angles, and it's really cool to see that. Night of the Living Dead, not only is just a great horror film, it's a fantastic look at the culture of the time, where we were of horror, where we were of politics. And while some of the stuff doesn't hold up and some of the stuff is dated and weird, and it looks like it's from the 60s, the story could be from any time, but the film looks like it's from the 60s. It's an enjoyable film, and one that I just had a good time watching again. It's nice to go back and see that a classic horror film, especially in the zombie genre, can still work in the modern context. I think that's really important to see, and I like this film a lot. And Judith O'Dea, she does great for what she's told to do. I wish there was more. And Dwayne Jones, I love him. I love his performance. I love how the movie ends with him. It's intense. It's gripping. It adds something to that world that we're not used to seeing. And I think that is a really positive outlook to give to a film like this. Just the intensity, the pain, the fear, all culminating into a low budget flick that would define a genre for years and decades to come. So my final thoughts on Night of the Living Dead are, it's great. It's classic. It's horror. It's zombies. It's dated at times, but still a good watch. And George A. Romero, one of the best out there to ever work in the industry. So thank you guys for watching this rendition of Horrific Tales. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. If you have any suggestions for films you'd like to see me talk about, leave them in the comments below. And if that's the case, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun, stay safe. Good luck. That was more Dracula, but you got the gist.